A tech influencer dared Keanu Reeves to sing on stage, as a joke, but when Keanu said yes, no one laughed. The next day, 5,000 people rose in stunned silence. What they heard wasn't just a voice, it was a secret from his past, buried for decades. And what happened next changed lives around the world. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Maya Tran stood at the edge of the stage inside the Moscone Center, gripping her clipboard so tightly the corners had begun to bend. The massive conference hall, filled with hums of machinery and voices, still felt surreal to her. 5 years ago, she was an unpaid intern, fetching coffees for tech execs who barely glanced her way. Now she was the youngest person ever to organize Future Connect, one of the biggest innovation summits in the world. The event had taken nearly a year to plan, and everything had to be perfect. The banners were hung, the lights tested, the sound checks complete, and yet her stomach wouldn't stop twisting. Because tomorrow morning, in front of 5,000 attendees and a live stream audience expected to cross 2 million, Keanu Reeves would take the stage. She still couldn't believe she'd pulled it off. Convincing his team had taken 4 months, 6 polite rejections, and 1 handwritten letter where she poured out her soul about what this event meant, not just for the industry, but for the humanity behind it. She wanted Future Connect to be more than just product pitches and buzzwords. She wanted it to be real. And somehow, Keanu had said yes. Now, less than 24 hours before his keynote, he was arriving for the private welcome mixer, an informal gathering where speakers, partners, and select press could mingle before the chaos began. Maya adjusted her lanyard and scanned the room. Soft jazz floated from the stage as trays of drinks passed between conversations. Everyone looked relaxed, except her. She caught sight of Rico Santiago near the bar, already nursing his second cocktail. Rico was a well-known tech influencer and columnist, famous for his sharp tongue and viral videos where he roasted everything from new gadgets to CEOs' wardrobe choices. He had a camera crew following him, and a grin that never quite reached his eyes. To Maya's relief, she spotted Keanu entering quietly through the side door. No entourage, no spotlight. He wore a simple black jacket over a gray t-shirt and jeans. He smiled and nodded politely at those who recognized him, but didn't seek attention. As always, there was something calm about his presence. He seemed to move through the room like a quiet breeze, grounding everything around him. Maya approached him, heartbeat in her throat. She introduced herself, thanking him for coming. Keanu returned a soft smile and said how honored he was to be part of something so forward-thinking. He said it in the kindest way, like he genuinely meant it. That was what made him different. He didn't talk like he was performing. He listened. He noticed. Even as others glanced over and whispered, Keanu's attention stayed fully on her. Maya tried to steady her voice as she led Keanu toward a quieter corner of the room where a few speakers were seated. She offered him a drink, which he declined, then gently excused herself to let him settle in. But before she could walk away, Rico Santiago's voice sliced through the low music and conversations like a bad ringtone. "There he is," Rico announced loudly, raising his glass. "The man of the hour, the philosopher of Hollywood." Maya froze mid-step. She turned slowly to see Rico striding toward Keanu, grinning as if he were about to make a toast at someone else's wedding. "Keanu," Rico said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Huge fan, well, of the early stuff anyway. Matrix, John Wick, after that it's all too serious, don't you think?" Keanu offered a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." "Oh, come on," Rico continued, gesturing to the small group that had turned their attention toward them. "You've got the brooding look down, but tomorrow, can we expect something different? A little fun, maybe?" Keanu tilted his head. "I wasn't aware it was supposed to be fun." "Well, it could be," Rico said, leaning closer. "In fact, I dare you to sing. On stage, just one song, something classic or ridiculous, whatever. But just imagine Keanu Reeves, Tech Summit, belting out Journey or something. A few people laughed. Some looked uncomfortable. Maya felt her stomach drop. Keanu blinked once, slow and measured. Then he smiled, not the half-smile from photos or movie premieres, but something quieter, something thoughtful. "What would I sing?" he asked. The laughter stopped. Rico's grin faltered. "Wait, you're not actually considering it." Keanu looked past him for a second, as if studying a thought just out of reach. Then he met Rico's eyes again. "Maybe I will." The room went silent. Even the background jazz seemed to fade. Rico chuckled nervously, trying to reclaim the moment. "That was a joke, man. No one expects you to actually—" But Keanu wasn't laughing. He just gave a small nod and turned to find a seat, leaving Rico standing there, looking like a man who had just stepped on his own punchline. Maya's heart pounded. This couldn't be happening. If Keanu actually went through with it, it could derail everything. She had worked too hard for this to turn into a meme. The audience would be filled with investors, world-class engineers, and policymakers. This was supposed to be about innovation, not karaoke. And yet Keanu had said it calmly. Not for effect, not to be dramatic, just honest, unshaken, as if the idea of singing on stage in front of thousands didn't rattle him at all. Or maybe it did. And that was what made it even more unsettling. Maya watched as Keanu sat in one of the leather armchairs near the fireplace, his posture relaxed but not slouched, hands resting lightly on his knees. The flickering light reflected off his profile, making him look like a portrait come to life. Around him, the room tried to return to normal. Waiters refilled glasses, speakers resumed conversations, but a nervous energy still lingered. Everyone had heard him, and no one quite knew what to make of it. She moved toward the back of the room, needing air, needing space. Rico had rejoined his friends at the bar, but he wasn't laughing anymore. Kai Nakamura, a fellow tech personality with a popular YouTube channel, leaned over and whispered something to him. Rico just shook his head, staring into his drink. Outside on the balcony, Maya stood beneath a string of dim patio lights and tried to collect her thoughts. This wasn't just about one unpredictable moment. It was about control, about perception. She'd spent months curating the speaker lineup, balancing every topic and voice with precision. The conference had become her identity, her career, her gamble, and now a simple dare meant to poke fun had become something else entirely. She checked her phone. Already someone had tweeted, "Keanu Reeves just agreed to sing tomorrow at Future Connect?" What? It was gaining traction, fast. Maya slipped her phone away and pressed her palms to the railing. She could try to stop him, pull him aside, suggest politely that he stick to the script. But something in his voice, that subtle pause before he answered, told her not to. Back inside, Keanu remained where he was, eyes lowered as he scrolled through something on his phone. Not disengaged, but deep in thought. He looked as if he was having a conversation no one else could hear. And maybe he was. Later that evening, as the mixer wound down and the room slowly emptied, Maya approached him again. She didn't mention the dare. She didn't ask about the song. "Everything okay for tomorrow?" she asked softly. Keanu looked up. He smiled, gentle, sincere. "I think so." His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it, like he was carrying something private, something long buried. Maya thought she saw a flicker of sadness pass through his eyes, but it vanished almost as quickly as it came. He stood, thanked her again for inviting him, and walked toward the elevators without another word. No entourage, no fanfare, just quiet footsteps disappearing down a polished hallway. Maya turned to the empty chair where he had been sitting. Something had shifted, and no amount of careful planning could undo what had just been set in motion. Tomorrow was going to be unlike anything she had prepared for, and somewhere deep inside, she already knew it might be the most important moment of her life. The elevator doors slid shut behind Keanu, and Maya stood frozen in the hallway, still holding her clipboard like a shield. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She didn't move until the last of the guests had left and the waitstaff began stacking chairs. Even then, she stayed rooted to the floor, as if the night itself might offer a rewind button if she stood still long enough. Inside the empty mixer room, Rico Santiago sat slumped on a bar stool, stirring melted ice in his glass. The bravado from earlier was gone. He wasn't posting clips or making jokes. His friends had long since wandered off. Kai had told him he'd pushed too hard, and Rico had snapped back at him. Now he was alone, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. He hadn't expected Keanu to say yes. No one had. The dare was just noise, a bit of performative teasing meant to break the ice. But now, everyone was whispering. Was he serious? Was he actually going to sing? Rico had just wanted to score a reaction, not hijack the entire conference. He finished his drink and muttered to no one, "I messed up." Maya stepped outside and called her driver, but instead of waiting, she paced beneath the canopy of lights stretched over the main plaza. The night air was cool, sharp against her skin. She checked her phone. 17 unread messages, mostly from her staff, asking the same question. Is Keanu really singing tomorrow? Her stomach clenched. She opened Twitter and typed, "Keanu Reeves, sing." The top result had over 20,000 retweets. A blurry photo from the mixer showed Keanu mid-sentence, next to the caption, "Did he just say, 'maybe I will'?" Another tweet read, "I was in the room. He looked dead serious. If he sings tomorrow, I will cry." A third, "If Keanu sings, I will name my startup after him." Maya's throat tightened. What if this spun out of control? What if it became a meme before he even stepped on stage? Worse, what if he really went through with it and it was terrible? She had fought tooth and nail to make Future Connect respected, serious, credible, and now everything was balanced on a maybe. She walked in circles under the trees until her hands started to shake. Then, without thinking, she pulled up a number she hadn't called in months. It rang twice. "Maya?" came the voice, gentle and gravelly. "Sweetheart, what time is it?" Maya swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Dr. Ross, I needed your voice." Dr. Evelyn Ross, her mentor from Stanford, had retired 2 years ago after building her legacy as one of the most respected women in tech leadership. She'd always told Maya that success without soul wasn't worth chasing. Tonight, Maya needed that reminder more than ever. "Tell me what happened," Dr. Ross said, her voice warming with concern. Maya stepped away from the lights and leaned against the cold steel railing overlooking the plaza. The city buzzed beneath her, but she barely noticed. She spoke quickly, recounting the dare, the laughter, Keanu's answer, and the explosion of social media in the hours since. When she finished, there was silence on the line for several long seconds. Finally, Dr. Ross exhaled. "You're not calling because you're afraid Keanu Reeves is going to sing. You're calling because you're afraid it might actually matter." Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" "You didn't build this conference to be safe," Dr. Ross said. "You built it because you believed tech needed more heart, more soul, more people. You wanted to create something brave. And now, someone might actually do that on your stage." "But what if it goes wrong?" Maya whispered. "What if people laugh? What if it becomes a joke? What if they cry?" her mentor replied. "What if they feel something real?" "Look, Keanu didn't get where he is by chasing applause. If he sings, it won't be for spectacle. It will be because something inside him needs to be heard. That's not your burden to carry. Your job is to hold the space, not control the outcome." Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. "And Maya," Dr. Ross added gently, "maybe the most powerful thing that could happen isn't a perfect speech. Maybe it's someone having the courage to be completely human in front of 5,000 people who've forgotten how. They stayed on the phone for another few minutes. By the time they hung up, Maya's hands had stopped trembling. She didn't feel certain, but she felt still. And that was enough for now. Elsewhere, high above the city, Keanu sat alone in his hotel suite. The dinner tray sat untouched on the side table. He'd turned off the TV hours ago. His phone, face down on the nightstand, buzzed every few minutes, but he ignored it. Instead, he sat by the window, legs crossed, a single lamp casting a soft glow over his lap. In his hands, he held a folded page. The paper was aged, its corners curled slightly from years of handling. The handwriting was delicate, written in faded blue ink. A lullaby. One his mother had written when he was 10. He had found it after her passing, buried in a box beneath old photographs and forgotten letters. He ran his thumb gently across the lyrics, mouthing the words without sound. The melody came back to him slowly. It wasn't complicated, just a simple rise and fall, like breath. She had written it to soothe him during long nights when the world felt too big and he felt too small. Tonight, the words felt heavier than usual. Keanu leaned back in the chair, the city lights reflecting dimly off the glass in front of him. He could see his own faint silhouette in the window, but it was the past he was really staring into. The child he once was. The mother who used to hum this song in the hallway, thinking he was asleep. The way her voice would catch sometimes near the end of the verse, as if she were singing to herself more than to him. He whispered the opening line, barely audible, then closed his eyes and sang it again, this time with air behind it. The sound reached, imitate. His voice cracked on the third line. He stopped, let the silence settle, then he started over. There was no audience, no camera, no one to judge. Only a man, a page of lyrics, and the ache of time. Each word brought her closer. Her handwriting, her humming, her hope. This song had lived quietly in a drawer for decades, and now it was in his hands, on the edge of becoming something new. He looked down at the final line. Even when the night is long, remember, your light belongs to you. That's what stayed with him. The thought of singing it tomorrow terrified him more than any movie premiere or stage appearance ever had. Because it wouldn't be a performance. It would be truth. Unfiltered, unrehearsed, unretractable. He folded the page and set it on the table beside him. Then he reached for the hotel notebook and began to write. Just one line. If I sing tomorrow, I'm not doing it to impress them. I'm doing it to find her again. Across the city, Maya sat in her hotel bed, laptop open, scrolling through her updated schedule, tweaking slides, editing her introduction. But her mind wasn't on logistics anymore. She kept glancing toward the door, half expecting a knock, a call, a message. Nothing came. Instead, she pulled up Keanu's old interviews on YouTube. Not the viral ones, the quiet ones. The moments where he talked about grief, loss, and what it meant to keep going. He had said something once that stuck with her. She found the clip, replayed it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak when your voice shakes. The screen faded to black. She sat in the stillness for a long time, the city below pulsing like a slow, restless heartbeat. Tomorrow, the world might laugh, or it might weep. Either way, something irreversible had been set in motion. And in a hotel room somewhere above her, a man was deciding whether to open the deepest part of himself. Not to be remembered, but simply to be known. 6 months earlier, in a modest corner of Los Angeles, Keanu Reeves stood outside a small voice studio on Melrose Avenue. The building didn't look like much. The brick was faded, the awning slightly torn, and the letters above the door were missing 2 vowels. But this was the place. He hesitated before walking in. This wasn't something his team knew about. No press, no cameras, no assistants. Just him and a name he'd found online after a week of searching. Luna Ramirez. She wasn't famous, but the testimonials had all said the same thing. She helped people find their voice, not polish it. The studio bell chimed softly when he opened the door. A warm scent of coffee and wood polish filled the air. It was quiet, almost reverent. Luna emerged from the back room with a kind, curious smile. Her long gray braid fell over one shoulder, and her eyes had the kind of calm that made you want to sit down and breathe. "Mr. Reeves," she said gently, "you found us." "I did," he replied, unsure how formal to be. "Thank you for making time." "I read your message," Luna said, gesturing toward the modest vocal booth in the back. "Why don't we sit and talk before we sing?" They settled into mismatched chairs in a room lined with old microphones and stacks of music books. Keanu rested a small satchel in his lap and unzipped it slowly, like he was handling something sacred. "I lost my mother last year," he said quietly. Patricia. She was a nutritionist by trade. But when I was going through her things, I found this. He pulled out a thin folder, slightly yellowed with time. Luna leaned forward as he opened it, revealing a dozen handwritten sheets. Lyrics, melodies, scribbled notes in the margins. Some were complete, others unfinished. All of them in the same careful script. She was a jazz singer in Toronto before I was born. Sang in lounges, little places. I didn't know much about it until I found these. She never really talked about it. Luna gently lifted one of the pages and studied it. "These are beautiful." "They're hers," Keanu said, his voice catching. "But one of them, this one." He pulled out a separate page, its edges more worn than the others. "It's called Midnight Window. She wrote it for me. I recognized one of the verses from when I was a kid. She used to hum it when I couldn't sleep. I always thought she made it up on the spot." Luna read the first few lines silently. The lyrics were simple, almost childlike, but there was something deeply intimate in the words. A lullaby, yes, but also a promise. A song written by a mother who wanted her child to feel safe in a world that often wasn't. Keanu looked at her. "I don't want to record it. I don't want to perform it. I just want to learn to sing it. Right, for her." Luna nodded, her expression softening even further. "You came to the right place." They began slowly. That first session wasn't about hitting notes or perfecting breath control. It was about unfreezing something that had been locked away. Luna asked him to stand in front of the old upright piano and just hum. No lyrics, no pressure, just let the melody come. His voice was hesitant at first, thin and uncertain. He stopped mid-note and apologized. More than once, Luna reassured him with every pause. "Don't apologize for rust. Rust shows you still have something worth uncovering." He tried again. The melody of Midnight Window was faint in his memory, like an old dream revisiting him after years of silence. When he sang the first full line aloud, his voice broke. He turned away, cleared his throat, tried again. Luna didn't stop him. She didn't correct him. She let him feel it. By the end of that hour, he had sung the entire song once. Quietly, imperfectly, but honestly. "That's more than most people ever do," Luna said gently, as he sat back down, emotionally drained. Over the next few weeks, he came every Tuesday evening. Always alone, always through the back entrance. Luna kept no photos, no autographs, no proof. Only music. Only trust. They worked on breathing, on pitch, on grounding the voice in emotion rather than force. Keanu learned how to stand with his feet apart to center his body, how to open his ribs without straining, how to let the sound come from truth, not effort. But more than technique, Luna helped him remember what it meant to feel connected. Not to a stage, not to an audience, but to something within himself. Between exercises, they talked. about his mother, about childhood, about fear. "She used to play Miles Davis at night," he said once. "When I was little, I thought jazz was boring. Now I'd give anything to hear her hum along just one more time." Luna listened without judgment. "She gave you a gift, even if it was hidden. Songs are like time capsules. Sometimes they wait years before they find the right voice." He brought more songs from the folder as the weeks went on. Some were clearly written for herself, lonely, minor-keyed poems about being a single mother, about leaving behind dreams. Others were playful, written in waltz time, full of imaginary conversations with her children. But Midnight Window was always the one he returned to. Every time he sang it, he discovered something new, a pause that meant more than he remembered, a line that felt heavier with time, a note she had marked with a small heart in the corner of the page. He'd never asked Luna to help him sing louder. He asked her to help him sing more truthfully. One evening, as the sun dipped low outside the dusty studio window, Keanu finished singing Midnight Window with a gentleness that made Luna pause. She didn't say anything for a while. She simply sat across from him, absorbing the silence that followed. "The first time," she said softly, "was the first time you didn't hold back." Keanu nodded, his voice quiet. It felt like she was in the room. "She probably was," Luna said, smiling faintly. "At least the part of her that wrote those words. You let her speak again. Through you." He leaned back, letting the moment settle into his chest. The healing he hadn't known he needed was happening quietly, measure by measure. "I'm not trying to be a singer," he said after a long pause. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I just didn't want her songs to disappear with her. That one, Midnight Window, it's not just about sleep. It's about not being alone in the dark." Luna understood. Before he left that night, Keanu handed her a flash drive. It contained scanned copies of every song in the folder. He told her he didn't know if they'd ever be shared, but if anything ever happened to him, he wanted someone to have them, someone who wouldn't turn them into a product. Luna took the flash drive and held it carefully, like a relic. "Your mother had a poet's heart," she said, "and maybe you were always meant to be the echo." Keanu looked away, emotions rising again. "She never got her voice heard, not really." "Through you now," Luna said, "through you." From that point on, their lessons changed. It wasn't just about one song anymore. It was about honoring a voice that had gone unheard for too long. Each week, Keanu practiced not to become better, but to become clearer, less guarded, more present. The voice that had once been silenced in childhood was slowly returning. He never told Luna exactly why he had come to her, but she sensed it. He wasn't preparing for a stage. He was preparing for something else, something personal, something sacred. The songs were never meant for fame. They were lullabies for the soul, tucked away in a box that only grief could unlock. 6 months later, on the eve of the Future Connect conference, he would find himself holding that same page of Midnight Window again, reading the lines that had once soothed a boy too afraid to sleep. And this time, he wouldn't be humming alone. He would be deciding whether to let the world hear the voice he had almost forgotten. The first few vocal sessions were awkward. Keanu stood in the middle of Luna's small studio with his shoulders stiff, arms loose at his sides, eyes focused anywhere but her. Luna asked him to take a breath from his diaphragm. He nodded, tried, and immediately exhaled too fast. She tried again. "And through your nose. Hold. Now exhale slowly, like you're cooling soup," she coached gently. He tried. The breath came out too hard, shaky at the end. He gave a quiet laugh and rubbed the back of his neck. "It's harder than it looks," he admitted. "You're trying too hard," she said, stepping beside him. "Breath isn't something you force. It's something you let happen, like trust." That word sat between them for a second. Trust. She led him through posture alignment, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly relaxed, chest lifted but not puffed. It felt unnatural to him at first. He'd spent a lifetime preparing for roles, stunts, interviews, always in control of his body and voice. But this wasn't about control. It was about surrender. Luna placed a hand lightly over her chest. When you sing, you don't push sound. You release it. From here. Keanu nodded. He tried humming a scale. The pitch was there, but his jaw was tight, his throat tense. She stopped him. "Where were you just now?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. His lips parted, then closed again. Finally he said, "Somewhere else." She nodded once. "That's okay. Let's go there." He hesitated, but the invitation was too gentle to ignore. He stepped back and picked up the page of Midnight Window. He looked at it for a moment, then back at Luna. "When I was a kid," he said, "I used to sing in the hallway. Just nonsense songs, whatever came to mind. Spaceships, stories. My mom would smile, clap even, said I had a storyteller's soul." His face tightened. "Palm night, my stepfather heard me. He didn't like it. Said it was soft, waste of time. He didn't want noise in the house. Said boys didn't sing lullabies. Said men weren't built for music, they were built for results." Luna didn't interrupt. She let him speak. "I stopped singing after that," he said quietly. "Didn't even hum. Not even in the car. It was like I'd swallowed that part of myself and buried it so deep I forgot it was ever there." She nodded slowly. "Then let's go find it." That day they didn't focus on notes or rhythm. They focused on breath, on sound, on memory. She asked him to hum the first note of his mother's song, not with his mouth, but with his chest, with memory. He closed his eyes, took a long breath, and released the first note of Midnight Window into the room. It cracked halfway through. He kept going. By the end of that session, Keanu's voice was raw, not from strain, but from emotion. When he tried to sing the third line of the chorus, something caught in his throat. He shook his head, stepped back, and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. His voice was shaky. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Luna walked over, placing a hand gently on the piano. "You don't need to be perfect," she said. "Just be honest." Those words didn't fix everything, but they gave him permission. And that was what he needed most. Each session became less about singing and more about remembering. Luna guided him through scales and vocal shapes, yes, but also into places he hadn't dared revisit in years. There was something deeply vulnerable about standing in a room, singing a song your mother once sang to you, and doing it as a grown man, still grieving her absence. One night, after a particularly emotional rehearsal, he sat in silence for several minutes. Then, barely above a whisper, he asked, "Do you think some parts of us just die when no one sees them?" Luna looked up from her notebook. "No, I think they sleep, and when the time is right, they wake up again." He didn't reply, but the next time he sang, his voice was stronger. He stopped bracing so hard, he stopped apologizing every time he stumbled. And slowly, the music stopped sounding like someone learning to sing and started sounding like someone remembering who they were. Outside the studio, something else began to shift. At home, he found himself humming in the kitchen. Sometimes when he was brushing his teeth, once while folding laundry. It startled him at first, these half-songs, these wandering melodies, but he didn't stop them. He found one of his mother's old scarves in the closet and left it draped over the piano bench. Her handwriting on that song sheet was starting to feel like a conversation he was still having. He didn't tell anyone about the lessons, not his friends, not his team, not even the people who asked him why he seemed lighter lately, or why he paused more often before answering questions in interviews. He didn't know how to explain it. That singing wasn't about showing off. It was about letting go. One Tuesday, Luna had him sing Midnight Window twice through, then stop. She looked at him, not as a coach, but as someone seeing a person finally stepping into a space they had been locked out of for years. "You're not just singing the notes now," she said. "You're telling the story." Keanu looked at the lyrics in his hands. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "I think I'm starting to hear her again," he said softly. Luna smiled. "Then we're doing it right." Over the following weeks, the studio became more than just a place for music. It became a space for memory, for reconnection. Keanu started bringing in more of his mother's songs. Some were playful, others quiet and aching. One was written entirely in metaphor, about a tree that kept growing even after storms had bent its branches. He began to see the woman behind the handwriting. Not just the mother, but the artist she had hidden from the world. The singer who never got her night on stage. The poet who wrote verses into silence because there was no one to hear them. Luna never pushed him to perform, but occasionally she'd ask questions that left him quiet for a long time. "What would she say if she heard you now?" He had answered that once with a quiet smile. "She'd probably tell me I was flat on that second verse and then kiss my forehead." They both laughed, but the laughter didn't erase the truth in his eyes. Some songs weren't just for the people who wrote them. Some were written for those who would finish them. And slowly, line by line, Keanu was finishing the conversation his mother had started years ago. At home, the change was more subtle but undeniable. He started leaving the windows open, letting in the sound of wind. He played old jazz records again. Sometimes he would stand in front of the piano without playing a single note, just reading her lyrics out loud. One night, he caught himself singing in the mirror. Softly, not even realizing it, until the final note left his mouth. He looked at his reflection and saw something strange. He looked like someone coming back to life. Not dramatically, not all at once, but piece by piece. Later that week, Luna ended their session a few minutes early. She sat across from him, holding a cup of tea, watching him quietly. "I don't know if you realize this," she said, "but you've been singing since the moment you walked in, even when your mouth wasn't moving." He gave her a puzzled look. "Your grief has been singing," she added, "and now your healing is starting to answer back." Keanu didn't say anything. He just sat there, letting the truth of it wash over him. He wasn't planning a concert. He wasn't preparing for a show. He was remembering the sound of his own voice, the way it used to feel before shame told him to be quiet. He didn't know then that one day soon, in a room full of strangers, he would sing that same lullaby again. And when he did, he wouldn't be alone. The sun had barely risen over San Francisco, but Maya was already wide awake, sitting cross-legged on her hotel bed, her laptop glowing in the dark. Her inbox was flooded. Texts, emails, Slack notifications, all asking the same thing. Is it true? Did Keanu say he's going to sing? Do we need to adjust tomorrow's run of show? She opened Twitter and instantly regretted it. The trending tab confirmed her fears. Keanu Sings was now the #2 topic worldwide. A viral tweet read, "Keanu Reeves might sing at Future Connect. I don't even care what the song is. I'm watching." Another joked, "Plot twist, Keanu's been secretly training with Beyoncé's vocal coach and drops a surprise jazz album live on stage." And then, beneath the sarcasm, a quieter post, "I hope it's true. If Keanu sings, even badly, it might be the most human thing ever shown on a tech stage." Maya scrolled through the flood of speculation, anxiety knotting in her stomach. She could feel the weight of it all growing by the second. What had started as a throwaway comment at a mixer had become a public expectation, a spectacle, a gamble. And the stakes weren't just reputational, they were personal. Because Maya knew what this conference meant to her. She had built Future Connect from the ground up to be more than another flashy expo. It was supposed to be a place where innovation met vulnerability, but she hadn't meant this. She pulled up the digital schedule and hovered her cursor over the keynote segment. She could still intervene. Brief his team. Suggest a safer route. Ask politely that he stick to the script. It wouldn't be controlling, just preventive. But something stopped her. The memory of Keanu's face the night before, the way he had answered Rico's dare, not with bravado, not even with sarcasm, but with quiet intention. That wasn't the face of someone joking. That was the face of someone deciding. She closed her laptop without making changes. Downstairs, in another room of the hotel, Rico Santiago paced back and forth, running both hands through his hair. He had barely slept. His thoughts raced in circles, each more panicked than the last. He kept thinking of that moment, Keanu looking at him, pausing, and saying, "Maybe I will." What if he actually did it? What if he sang and it was awful? What if the crowd laughed? What if Keanu walked off stage humiliated? And what if that embarrassment wasn't just his? What if it became Rico's fault? He grabbed his phone, opened a new message, stared at the screen. He typed, "Hey, I'm really sorry about what I said last night. Please don't feel like you have to go through with it." Then he deleted the text. He didn't know if silence was better or worse. All he knew was he hadn't meant for any of this. Up in his suite, Keanu sat by the window, the same page in his hand he had read 100 times before. The city stretched below him, steel and fog, glass and motion. But the world outside barely registered. He was focused on the paper. His mother's handwriting. He whispered the opening line of Midnight Window, then paused, tried again, let it drift into the room. His voice was steady but quiet. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He hadn't made a final decision. He didn't owe anyone a song. And yet, something about that moment at the mixer had cracked something open. He hadn't planned to say yes. He hadn't even considered it until the words left his mouth. And still, they had felt right. He stood, walked slowly to the mirror above the desk, and sang the chorus under his breath. Just enough to hear himself, the same way he had sung it to Luna so many times. It still felt fragile, but it was real. Then he sat down, picked up his phone, and scrolled to her contact. The line rang twice. "Keanu," Luna answered, her voice low and warm. "Keanu, I didn't wake you, did I? You sound like someone carrying a choice." He let out a breath. "It's everywhere, online. People are expecting something. I don't even know how they found out. Maybe always find out. I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know. It was a joke," he said, "a dare. But now it isn't." There was a long pause. He could hear her waiting, not pushing, just being there. "I don't want it to become a joke," he said finally. "Or worse, something I regret." "Then don't do it for them," Luna said. "Don't do it for the crowd, or the conference, or the noise." He was silent. "Do it for her," she said. "And if not for her, then for the boy she used to sing to. You. Before the roles, before the weight." "I'm scared," Keanu admitted. "That means you're standing on something true," Luna replied. "If you weren't scared, it wouldn't matter to you." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I keep thinking," he paused, "what if I open that part of myself and they laugh? What if I let them see something real and they just scroll past it like it was nothing? Then that's on them," she said gently. "But if you don't sing, if you stay silent, what happens to the part of you that came here to speak?" He closed his eyes, pressing the folded paper to his chest. "Keanu," Luna said softly, "you don't need permission. You already have the words. Now the question is, do you want to share them?" He didn't answer right away. He didn't know yet, but he was listening. After the call ended, Keanu sat still for a long time, the phone resting on the table beside him, the room dark except for the soft city glow pushing through the window. He didn't move, didn't eat, barely blinked. Instead, he read the lyrics again, slowly, as if for the first time. Midnight window, silver sky, even shadows say goodbye. Though you're quiet, though you ache, the light inside will never break. His mother's voice seemed to echo inside the silence. He rose from the chair and walked to the piano near the window, the one he'd asked the hotel to bring up, just in case. He sat on the bench, placed the paper in front of him, and placed his fingers lightly on the keys. He played a few quiet chords, then again, a little slower. Then he sang. Not loud, not polished, but steady. One verse, one chorus. It didn't sound perfect, but it felt like her. That was enough. He stopped after the final note. The silence that followed was deep, restful. For the first time that night, his hands stopped shaking. Across the city, Maya lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark. She hadn't made any public statement, she hadn't called his team, she hadn't sent any notes or warnings or revisions. Instead, she had let the moment breathe. She had taken Dr. Ross's advice and chosen to trust not just Keanu, but the space she'd built. A space where something honest might be allowed to happen. Still, her stomach felt like a fist. She opened her laptop again, clicked refresh on the event stream. The numbers were climbing, registrations were up, social media mentions were doubling every hour. Speculation had reached a fever pitch. She didn't care about the numbers, not tonight. She cared about whether the moment, whatever it turned out to be, would survive the noise. A new message pinged from her assistant, Jake. The audience team hasn't confirmed anything. We'll have a second mic ready backstage just in case. Maya closed her laptop. She got up, crossed to the window, and looked out at the faint outline of the bay. Somewhere in that city of millions, a man was deciding whether to let the world hear the most private part of himself. It wasn't about whether he could sing. It was about whether he would dare. She whispered into the glass, not knowing if he'd ever hear it. Whatever you choose, it's enough. At that same hour, Keanu sat on the bench, the piano behind him, the lyrics folded once again in his pocket. He didn't know if he would sing tomorrow. But if he did, it wouldn't be for applause. It would be for her. The doors to the main auditorium opened at 8:00 a.m. sharp, and within 20 minutes, every one of the 5,000 seats was filled. The energy in the room felt electric, buzzing, restless, not the usual anticipation before a keynote, but something deeper, something more uncertain, more alive. Conference volunteers passed out programs, stagehands adjusted cameras, and rows of digital screens blinked with the Future Connect logo. But no one was really looking at the stage design or agenda. They were all waiting for one thing. In the backstage wing, Maya stood with her arms folded tight, her headset clicking with updates she couldn't hear over the racing in her chest. Her team buzzed around her with last-minute checks, but her eyes stayed fixed on the clock above the curtain. It was 8:57. She hadn't spoken to Keanu since the mixer. His team hadn't sent a confirmation, no revised script, no new requests, no audio cues for a musical segment. Still, she'd asked Jake to have a mic placed discreetly on a stool at the center of the stage, just in case. Jake approached now, whispering, "He's ready." Maya gave a small nod. "Okay, cue the lights." Out in the front row, Rico Santiago shifted in his seat for the 10th time. His foot bounced uncontrollably. Kai sat beside him, camera in hand, glancing at his watch, then the stage, then his notes. The two hadn't spoken much that morning. Rico's jaw was tense, and his fingers fidgeted with the program in his lap. "You think he'll really do it?" Kai asked under his breath. Rico didn't answer. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for anymore. At 9:00 a.m. on the dot, the house lights dimmed. The spotlight snapped to the center of the stage. Maya stepped out in a sleek navy dress, took a breath, and walked to the podium. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the pressure gripping her lungs. "Welcome to Future Connect 2025. Today is about courage, innovation, and the human stories that make technology meaningful. I'm honored to introduce a speaker who has long embodied the spirit of resilience, reflection, and reinvention." She paused. "Please welcome Keanu Reeves." The applause came instantly, and it was thunderous. People stood, cameras rose, the sound rolled through the auditorium like a wave. Then he walked out. Black blazer, dark jeans, no notes in hand, calm, composed, and quiet in his movements. He reached the center of the stage, smiled gently, and waited for the applause to soften. When it did, he spoke. "Thank you." The word echoed like a stone dropped in still water. Then he began his talk. No music, no theatrics. Just his voice, warm and low, as he spoke about the intersection of technology and compassion, about what it meant to innovate not just efficiently, but ethically. No one moved. Every word seemed heavier than the one before. For the next 40 minutes, Keanu moved gracefully through his keynote. He spoke of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, and the balance between innovation and human vulnerability. He didn't rush. He didn't read from a screen. His presence was calm, deliberate. The room remained riveted. But everyone in the audience was waiting for something else. You could feel it in the way people leaned forward, in the way phones stayed lowered in laps instead of up for selfies. It was in the stillness, the breathless pauses, a shared awareness that something unspoken lingered between the lines. Then, at minute 41, Keanu paused. He glanced down, then up. His hand drifted toward his jacket pocket, and the audience collectively tensed. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Last night," he began, "someone asked me if I could sing." A quiet ripple ran through the crowd, half laugh, half gasp. "Amy said it as a joke," Keanu continued, his voice even. "I said I'd think about it." Now the room was completely still. Keanu looked across the rows of faces. 5,000 people who had come to hear about the future, now hanging on a single question, none of them expected to matter so much. He took a breath, the kind Luna had taught him, grounded, deep. "I'm not a singer," he said. "Not professionally, not trained, and I've never done anything like this before. So I want to ask your permission." The room held its breath. "I want to sing a song my mother wrote." Silence. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The edges were worn. The handwriting was visible to no one but him. "She used to sing this to me when I couldn't sleep. She called it Midnight Window. I found it again after she passed." He walked to the center of the stage, not to the podium. The crew dimmed the lights behind him. The single spotlight narrowed. A quiet murmur from backstage, the extra mic, was live. Keanu unfolded the page with slow care and looked at it. Then he looked up at the audience. "She never got to share this with anyone but me," he said. "So if it's all right with you, I'd like to sing it now. Not for show, just for her." From somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Yes." Then the entire room fell quiet again. No music cued, no band, just one man, one voice, one song. Keanu closed his eyes, took another breath, and sang the first line. His voice was soft, barely louder than a whisper, but it was steady. The words drifted out into the auditorium, unaccompanied. The silence behind it was sacred. Every person in that room leaned in, because they knew they were witnessing something they hadn't come for, but suddenly couldn't live without. By the second verse, something had shifted. Keanu's voice, though never polished, carried a weight no studio perfection could replicate. He wasn't singing with technique. He was singing with memory, with ache, with gratitude. and every note seemed to echo with the years he had carried this song alone. A few audience members began to cry without realizing it, not out of sadness, but out of recognition. Because the lyrics weren't flashy. They weren't complex. They spoke of being awake at midnight, of staring through the window into the dark, of hoping someone, somewhere, was thinking of you too. A man in the front row closed his eyes. A woman pressed her hand to her chest. A tech executive in the third row lowered his head, quietly wiping his cheek. It wasn't about the voice. It was about the vulnerability, the quiet courage it took to stand there without armor, without preparation, and simply offer something real. When Keanu reached the final chorus, the room was pin-drop silent. The words hung in the air like soft light. She said the night is only lonely when you stop looking for the stars. He held the final note a moment longer than needed. Not to impress, just to let it live. Then he opened his eyes. No one clapped. Not at first. The silence after was almost heavier than the silence before. A full 5 seconds passed. Then came the standing ovation. Not explosive, not frenzied. It rose like a wave, gentle, rising from the center, then sweeping the room. People stood slowly, reverently, as if instinctively sensing that this wasn't just a performance, it was a release. For Keanu, for them. Keanu didn't bow. He didn't smile. He simply nodded once, lips pressed together, eyes glassy with something unspoken. Then he walked back to the podium, folded the paper carefully and placed it in his jacket again. He cleared his throat. "I'll take your questions now." The audience laughed softly, lovingly. It was a way to breathe again. A young woman near the back stood first. She didn't ask about AI or ethics or digital innovation. She asked, "What did she call you when she sang that to you?" Keanu's pause was almost too long. Then he said softly, "Starboy." The room went still again, but in a new way now. Not silent, just humbled. Because at that moment, everyone realized this wasn't a tech conference anymore. It was a love letter, and they had been invited to witness its delivery. Keanu stepped away from the podium, his footsteps light but deliberate. There was no music playing, no voiceover, no screens flashing behind him, just a soft spotlight that followed as he walked toward the front of the stage, closer to the edge, as if closing the distance between himself and the audience. He carried the folded piece of paper in his hand like it was something fragile, something sacred. He stopped and looked out over the sea of faces. Thousands of people sat in complete silence, eyes fixed on him, waiting, not for performance, but for presence. That kind of silence wasn't forced. It was chosen, grown from the shared understanding that something rare was about to happen. "I'd like to share something with you," Keanu said quietly. "It's not part of the scheduled program. It's not in the slides, but it's been in me for a long time." He paused, holding up the paper. The spotlight caught just enough to show the soft bends along the creases. "When I was 10 years old, my mother used to write little songs, just for me. She'd leave them by my pillow, or sing them to me when I couldn't sleep." There was a tremor in his voice, but he didn't hide it. She called this one Midnight Window. I never forgot it. I found it again after she passed. It was in a notebook tucked behind a drawer in her old dresser. Same handwriting, same lyrics, same quiet love. He unfolded the paper slowly, smoothing it flat with care. Then he looked up, and for a second the entire room seemed to exhale in unison. I've never sung this before in public, never thought I would. But tonight, it feels like the right time. No instruments, no cues, just Keanu's voice, bare, vulnerable, and unguarded. He began. The first line came out uncertain, soft. His voice shook, just slightly. But instead of retreating from the quiver, he stayed with it. He honored it, Let it guide him toward something honest. Through the midnight window, I can see the moon lean low. The audience didn't move. Not a cough. Not a rustle. I wonder if she's watching me from somewhere I can't go. Keanu's voice settled. It wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, but it was real, pure and unpolished. Like a child whispering the truth in a language only love could understand. I count the stars above me like the freckles on her face. There was a hitch in his breath, but he kept singing. His eyes weren't closed, but they weren't focused either. He was somewhere else, somewhere only he and Patricia knew. And pray the night will carry me to find her secret place. Keanu's voice wavered again near the second verse, but it wasn't weakness. It was something else. Like the sound of someone remembering a promise they thought they'd forgotten. He didn't look for applause. He didn't search for approval. He just kept going, line by line, as if each lyric helped him breathe more deeply. Sheep told me dreams are bridges, not cages built from fear. Someone in the third row wiped a tear and reached for the hand beside them. And even if I lose my way, her voice will pull me near. The emotion in the room was heavy, but not sorrowful. It was reverent, like watching a man return to the safest place he'd ever known and letting everyone witness it without apology. I watched the shadows moving. They dance across the floor. Keanu's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the paper, but he never stopped. He didn't hide the fragility. He let it be seen. That was the power of it. Not the melody, not the phrasing, but the rawness. The nakedness of grief woven with gratitude. Theme whispers in the quiet, "You're not alone no more." There was no dramatic swell of sound, no music to fill in the gaps, but the stillness behind his voice filled the auditorium like a symphony. Keanu closed his eyes for the next lines, and his voice softened into something even gentler than before. If stars could leave a message, they'd trace it in the blue. A few audience members pressed tissues to their faces now, not from spectacle but from memory. Their own mothers, their own lost voices. The song wasn't just his anymore. It had become everyone's. To say, "No matter where you go, my heart's still holding you." He opened his eyes again and for a moment looked out, not at the crowd, but above them, as if the song wasn't for the room, but for someone just beyond the ceiling, just beyond the stars. Then came the bridge. Fewer words, more breath. When the dawn forgets my name. A pause. I'll still know hers. There was a sharp inhale from somewhere near the front. One woman covered her mouth, stunned by the rawness of it. Keanu's voice caught on the next line, but recovered, quiet and unwavering. Seem said to find the light in dark. You don't need perfect sight. He stepped forward slightly. Just one small motion. It felt like stepping through a memory. You only need to keep your eyes open through the night. By the time Keanu reached the final verse, a deep hush had settled across the entire auditorium. It wasn't the kind of silence that waited for something to end. It was the kind that wanted to hold on just a little longer. The paper in his hands trembled as he read the final lines. I walk a road without a map, but still I move ahead. He took a breath, eyes slightly glistening under the stage lights. Because I know she walks with me, though all the stars have fled. The vulnerability in his voice wasn't just in how it cracked, it was in how he let it. He didn't try to be strong in the way most people think of strength. His courage was quieter. It lived in the space between the notes, in the risk of being seen fully, without armor. A camera operator backstage instinctively pulled in tighter, then froze, afraid that even the mechanical sound of the zoom might break the spell. I hear her in the silence when all the world has gone. Keanu looked upward again. He didn't say her name, but everyone knew who he meant. She unhums the song she wrote for me and helps me carry on. He closed his eyes as he reached the final line. Not for drama, but for reverence. I see you in every star I follow. The last note hung in the air like a feather, soft, suspended, waiting to land. Then it ended. No echo, no applause. Not yet. The silence afterward was the loudest part of all. Every person in that room sat perfectly still, as if moving too soon might break something fragile. Some clutched their chests, others blinked quickly to keep their tears from falling. The entire room was suspended in that shared breath between music and meaning. Then someone in the front row stood, to clap, just to honor the moment. Others followed, slowly, quietly. The standing ovation didn't erupt, it unfolded. Not for performance, but for presence, for memory, for a mother's voice that had somehow reached thousands of strangers in a room that had never planned to hear it. Keanu didn't bow, he didn't gesture for applause. He simply lowered the paper, folded it again with both hands, and pressed it gently to his chest. He stood there for a few more seconds, taking it all in. Then he stepped back toward the podium. His eyes scanned the crowd, softer now. Changed. He cleared his throat gently. My mother's name was Patricia, he said. She never performed on a stage, never chased fame, but she loved with everything she had. And this was her voice. Another pause, another breath. I just wanted you to hear it too. That was it. No mic drop, no spotlight fade, no announcement of the next agenda item. Just a man, a memory, and a song that lived far beyond the walls it was sung in. And as Keanu stepped off the stage, the room remained standing, not out of habit, but out of gratitude for the song, for the silence, and for the man who dared to sing the voice of his mother into a world too often too loud to hear her. The ovation still hadn't stopped. Keanu had stepped off stage, but the crowd remained standing. Some clapped. Others just stood still, hands over hearts, trying to take in what had just happened. The air felt different now, charged but not loud, full but not overwhelming. Wolf checked the crowd. He believed it was wide. Backstage, Maya stood near the curtain, unable to move. She had heard him rehearse the words the night before, in a voice barely louder than a whisper. But nothing had prepared her for what it would feel like to watch him do it in front of thousands. Her fingers pressed to her lips, not to hold back tears, but to keep from audibly sobbing. She didn't want to break the moment. She didn't want to make it about her. Rico stood a few feet away, stunned. His clipboard had fallen sideways. He didn't bother to pick it up. He had spent weeks coordinating security, tech flow, VIP seating, and press. He thought he knew what tonight would be. He thought he'd mapped every outcome. But he hadn't mapped this. And then there was Kai Nakamura, the rising YouTuber who had come with every intention of documenting the conference's most awkward moments. He had been one of the loudest voices online, asking, "Is Keanu seriously going to sing?" His handheld camera, still powered on, hung limply at his side now. He had forgotten to record. His eyes were red. He didn't even notice. In that moment, he wasn't a critic or a creator, he was a son who had once had a mother who sang to him too. Keanu returned to the podium once more. The audience quieted instantly. He leaned into the mic, this time with no notes, no paper in hand. What just happened? He paused. That wasn't planned. That wasn't rehearsed. That was me remembering who taught me how to be still. He looked up. I want to say something to all of you, especially the ones out there building the future, designing the next big thing, trying to be perfect. Another pause. Being vulnerable isn't weak, it's strength, and I hope we don't forget that when we're building the world we're all going to live in. There was no dramatic music swell, no stage manager cue. He didn't bow. He just stepped back from the mic. Then he turned and walked off stage. And that's when the crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause, it wasn't obligatory, it was thunderous. People shouted his name, clapped until their hands stung, and even those in the media section stood on their chairs trying to capture it all, not the footage, but the feeling. Maya turned toward the hallway, her chest rising and falling in deep, uneven breaths. Rico moved to catch up with Keanu, but stopped when he saw the look on his face. It wasn't exhaustion, it wasn't triumph. It was something far simpler. Peace. And backstage, as the echo of applause filtered through the walls, phones across the auditorium began to buzz. The outside world had started to notice. The first clip to go viral wasn't even a full recording. It was 15 seconds of shaky video from someone's phone. It caught only the end of the song, Keanu's voice barely audible over the quiet in the room. And the moment he folded the paper and pressed it to his chest, someone had captioned it, "Helm sang a lullaby his mother wrote, no background music, just his heart." Within 3 minutes, it had over 100,000 views. Within an hour, it had 5 million. News outlets scrambled. The keynote hadn't just become the most talked about moment of the conference, it had become a cultural event. Anchors used words like sacred, intimate, historic. But it was the ordinary people online who captured it best. A nurse from Iowa posted, "I didn't expect to cry during a tech keynote, but I did. My mom died 2 years ago. That song brought her back for 3 minutes." A college student in Boston wrote, "I watched this alone in my dorm. Now I'm calling my mom just to say thank you." That's what Keanu did. And perhaps the most powerful post came from Kai Nakamura himself. He uploaded a short, dark video of his own face in silhouette. You could hear applause in the background, but his voice was quiet. "I came to this conference expecting to laugh at Keanu Reeves. I thought it would be weird, cringy, maybe even embarrassing, but then he sang. And I've never felt more wrong in my life. What I saw wasn't an actor trying to be a singer. It was a son grieving his mother in front of the world. And I'll never joke about someone being vulnerable again." That video reached 10 million views in under 12 hours. At the airport the next morning, Keanu sat alone in a corner of the terminal, wearing the same dark blazer he had worn on stage. A family approached him, 2 kids and their dad. The youngest child clutched a worn teddy bear. "Are you the man who sang the Star song?" the boy asked. Keanu smiled. "Yeah, I guess I am." The boy said, "My mommy sings to me too. But your song sounded like it was looking for someone. Like trying to find them in the sky?" Keanu nodded gently. "That's exactly what it was." The boy handed him the teddy bear for a moment. Keanu held it in his lap, gave it a little squeeze, then passed it back. No selfies, no autographs, just a quiet moment shared. The father mouthed, "Thank you," as they walked away. Keanu sat there for a while longer. He didn't scroll through his phone, he didn't check the trending headlines. He just sat still, the way Patricia had taught him to. Outside the window, the morning light turned the tarmac silver. And somewhere above that, beyond the metal wings and jet engines, the stars were still out, just harder to see in daylight. But he knew they were there. And now, so did the rest of the world. The morning after Keanu's performance, something unexpected began to happen. Not online, at least not at first, but inside the very halls of the conference itself. People who had flown in for product reveals and industry panels started canceling their meetings, not out of protest, but because something more important had begun taking root. In one breakout room, a tech CEO scheduled to give a talk on digital monetization quietly asked to change his topic. When his session began, he stood in front of the room, cleared his throat, and said, "I've never shared this publicly before, but 5 years ago my company failed. And I hid it. I made it look like I pivoted, but really, I broke." He spoke for 20 minutes, without slides, without stats, just his story. By the end, several audience members were in tears, not because he failed, but because he said it out loud. Across the hall, a venture capitalist opened her panel on startup funding with a confession. When my son died, I didn't tell anyone in my company. I went back to work the next week and told people I'd had food poisoning. I was afraid grief would make me look weak. She paused, her voice cracking. I watched Keanu Reeves sing a lullaby last night, and for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed for breaking. The walls that had stood so tall between innovation and emotion were suddenly falling. And once they fell, people didn't just cross over, they gathered. In a side room where a junior developer was supposed to demo a new productivity tool, he asked the attendees if they'd mind if he started with something else. They agreed, so he pulled out his guitar and said, "This is for my mom." And then he sang Midnight Window. By noon, clips were spreading faster than any product announcement ever had, not just of Keanu's moment, but of what followed. Conference attendees recording each other singing, crying, listening. CEOs sitting in folding chairs beside interns, sharing stories of anxiety, divorce, burnout, and doubt. Maya didn't plan any of it. She simply watched it unfold. The schedule board in the main hallway was soon covered in post-it notes, session titles crossed out and replaced with things like Reef and Code, How I Built While I Broke, Where the Pitch Deck Fails, Who Are You Then, Peeling Through the Terminal, and scribbled on one bright blue post-it, "Thank you, Patricia." Backstage, Maya sat in the quiet with Rico, reading through dozens of messages being sent to the conference's inbox. One was from a 22-year-old app developer in Brazil. It read, "I never knew men were allowed to feel like that in public. I watched Keanu's video 10 times. Then I called my dad and told him I missed him. We haven't spoken in years. He cried. I cried. Thank you." Rico leaned back in his chair, eyes wet. "Do you know what you did?" he asked Maya quietly. She shook her head. "You didn't just run a conference," he said. "You started something we don't have a name for yet." By the end of that week, Maya's inbox had over 10,000 messages. Most weren't about products or presentations. They were stories, confessions, thank yous. She posted one simple message on the conference's social media page. This was never just about tech. It was always about people. Let's remember that. It was shared more than 1 million times. Kai Nakamura, whose channel had previously focused on roasting influencers and overhyped events, uploaded a new vlog titled, "I Witnessed the Most Human Moment in Tech History." It opened not with fancy edits or music, but with Kai sitting cross-legged on the floor of his hotel room, eyes still puffy from the night before. He spoke directly into the camera. "I thought I came to this conference for drama. I thought it'd be fun to tear someone down. But last night I watched Keanu Reeves do something I didn't think people like him ever did. He let himself be seen. And I'm realizing now, maybe the most revolutionary thing we can do isn't building faster tech. Maybe it's being honest about who we are." The video hit 20 million views in 2 days. Rico, still overwhelmed by the wave of response, decided to write a short op-ed. It ran in 3 major newspapers under the headline, "The Day Keanu Reminded Us We're Human." In the piece, he described watching the crowd shift from skepticism to reverence. He wrote, "We go to conferences looking for answers, but sometimes we're given something better. A mirror." Keanu Reeves didn't teach us a new technology. He reminded us what it feels like to remember someone we've lost and still carry them with us. That memory is what makes us human. That memory is where meaning begins. But perhaps the most surprising ripple came not from media or executives, but from students. Across college campuses and high schools, people began singing Midnight Window. A cappella groups, music classes, even dorm room jam sessions. The lyrics, hand-transcribed from videos and cleaned up by volunteers online, began circulating in Google Docs and Reddit threads. It wasn't a chart topper. It was something deeper, a private song made public, a lullaby turned into an anthem. Artists started painting the lines, Coders built apps that played the song's lyrics line by line, triggered by typing speed or heart rate. One young woman in Seoul recorded a version in Korean, layered with ambient street sounds from her city. Another in South Africa turned it into a spoken-word poem. Someone tweeted, "Midnight Window is the new anthem for anyone who's ever loved and lost and still hoped." Keanu never responded directly. He didn't post about it. He didn't give follow-up interviews. But he did write a letter to Maya, hand-signed and delivered privately. Inside it were just 3 words. For her, thank you. And in the quiet corners of the world, where people once felt alone with their grief or shame, a simple song about a mother and a boy and a window in the dark was now reminding them they weren't alone anymore. 3 days after the conference ended, Maya sat in her apartment with a cardboard box at her feet. Inside were over 200 handwritten letters. They came from everywhere. No return addresses, no official channels, just envelopes, some torn at the edges, some with drawings in the corners, and nearly all of them marked with trembling ink. The first she opened was from a 4th grade class in Little Rock, Arkansas. The teacher's name was Miss Rowley. She wrote, "After showing your conference video to my students, we spent the day talking about memories that make us feel safe. One student said she didn't have any until she heard that song, that it made her feel like maybe someone out there could still care for her, even if she hadn't met them yet." Attached were folded pieces of colored paper, each with lyrics written by students. Some rhymed, others didn't. None of them were perfect, but all of them were real. One read, "When I get scared, I look at my nightlight, but I think of the song too, because it sounds like a light." Haley, age 9. Another envelope had no name. It was addressed only to the woman who gave Keanu a stage. Inside, a letter in delicate cursive. "I'm 84. I live in a memory care home in Vermont. My daughter visited yesterday. She played your clip for me. I sang along to the lullaby. My nurse said it was the first time I sang anything in 5 years." Maya put the letter down and wept. That afternoon, she delivered a small stack of selected letters to Keanu's team. No press, no cameras, just a sealed envelope with a note on the front. "You should see what they're saying." Keanu read them that night in his living room, the folded ones first, then the longer ones. He sat on the floor, legs crossed, surrounded by pages covered in ink and pencil, with margins full of thanks and questions and trembling truths. One letter stopped him cold. It was written by a woman in Kansas City. The return address was a family counseling center. She wrote, "My 17-year-old son hasn't spoken to anyone outside our house in 8 months. He barely eats. He doesn't leave his room. Last night, I walked past his door and heard something. He was humming. I stopped and listened. It was the song, your song, the lullaby. I don't know how he found it, but it found him, and he came out this morning and asked if I'd sit with him while he played it again." The final line read, "Your voice brought him back." Keanu sat very still, not because he didn't believe it, but because part of him always had. He folded the letter slowly and placed it on top of the others. The room was quiet, no music, no applause, just the weight of something he hadn't expected, healing. Keanu didn't sleep that night. He didn't need to. He sat with the letters until the sun came up, reading each one slowly, as if every sentence was a thread pulling him back to something he thought he'd lost forever. They weren't fan mail. They weren't praise. They were mirrors. Reflections of grief, hope, and memory, written in voices that reminded him of Patricia's, tender, weathered, and full of quiet strength. There was one from a man in Detroit who had spent 12 years in prison. "I used to write lyrics to survive. Most of them I threw away. I thought no one would ever hear them. Then I heard you sing and I realized maybe songs don't have to be perfect. Maybe they just have to be true." Another was from a woman in Thailand who had lost her sister to cancer. She mostly used to hum in her sleep, I recorded it once, years ago. I played your song right after, and for the first time, I heard the same rhythm. It made me feel like they were talking to each other through time. And one letter, scrawled in blocky handwriting on lined notebook paper, came from a 10-year-old boy in Canada. My grandma sings to me, but she's really sick now. She can't talk much anymore. But I showed her your song and she squeezed my hand really tight. She never did that before. I think she liked it. I'm going to sing it to her until she goes to sleep forever. Keanu folded that letter last. Then he got up, walked to his piano, one he hadn't touched in weeks, and sat on the bench with no expectation. He laid the folded lyrics of Midnight Window above the keys. He didn't play the melody. He didn't need to. He simply whispered the last line one more time. I see you in every star I follow. And he believed it. 3 days later, Keanu quietly reached out to a music teacher in Los Angeles whose middle school choir had gone viral singing Midnight Window in a school auditorium. The version had been shared over 1 million times, not because of how it sounded, but because of the way the children closed their eyes while singing. They weren't performing. They were remembering someone. Keanu sent them a letter. Your voices reminded me of home. Keep singing. Don't worry if your voice shakes. That's what makes it human. The students framed the letter in the front hallway. Meanwhile, Maya had quietly started compiling the letters into a digital archive. No sponsors, no investors, just a simple site called The Window We Shared. It featured voice recordings, letters, drawings, and personal messages from people around the world who had been moved by the lullaby. It wasn't designed to trend. It was built to endure. One of the most visited pages was a section called Letters That Changed Me, and right at the top sat a message from an anonymous contributor who signed only as Someone Healing. I had forgotten how to cry. I had forgotten how to remember without breaking. When I heard his voice tremble, I thought, if he can do it, so can I. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel again. Keanu read that one too. And in that moment, he realized something he hadn't dared to imagine when he first unfolded the paper on that stage. Patricia's voice hadn't just reached the back row of an auditorium. It had reached the world. The recording studio sat quietly on a tree-lined street in Vancouver. Nothing flashy, no label banners, no gold records on the walls. Just a single plaque at the door that read Stardust, painted by hand. Keanu had chosen the place himself. It reminded him of the garage where his mother used to write her songs at night. Modest, echoey, full of warmth. Inside, Luna adjusted a mic stand, gently turning the knob so it caught the light just right. She had flown in from New York without hesitation. When Keanu called her and said, I want to record them, she knew exactly what he meant. Not songs, but her songs. Patricia's handwritten lyrics had been carefully digitized, but the originals still sat in Keanu's leather-bound folder, edges frayed, corners softened by time. Some were written on napkins, others on notebook paper torn from old school books. Most didn't have titles, just scribbled lines at the top like, for when you're sad, or to help you sleep. The idea was simple. They would record the entire collection. No marketing, no label deals, just honesty. One song at a time. The album would be called Songs from Midnight. Luna dimmed the lights and nodded to the engineer, who wore headphones and kept his hands folded over the soundboard like he was afraid to breathe. Keanu stepped into the booth, the same way he'd walked onto that stage at the conference. No pretense, no act. He held the first song in his hands, one Patricia had called Stillness Keeps Me. The melody was soft, built around only a few chords, and Luna had added a quiet acoustic line underneath, just enough to guide him without changing the soul of it. The first take was raw. Keanu's voice broke twice. He asked them not to fix it. That was the point. This wasn't a polished product. It was a gift, a thank you whispered through time. They moved slowly through the songbook, recording 2 or 3 pieces each day. Some were only a verse long, others had full choruses, repeated gently like mantras. Each one sounded like Patricia, full of comfort without needing to be grand. One day, midway through the week, Keanu's daughter visited the studio. She had come in quietly, not wanting to interrupt, but when she heard the familiar hum of Luna tuning her guitar, she smiled. "This is Grandma's, isn't it?" Keanu nodded. She walked over to the table where the lyrics lay spread and scanned them with a soft reverence. Then her finger paused on one. "Did she ever sing this one to you?" Keanu looked at the page. It read, "Where the wind waits?" He nodded again. "When I was about your age." His daughter turned the page toward him and asked, "Can we do this one together?" They stood together in the recording booth, father and daughter. No rehearsals, no talk of harmonies or key changes. Just two voices that had shared the same lullabies years apart. Keanu handed her a copy of the lyrics. The paper crackled slightly as she unfolded it. She held it with both hands, carefully, like something alive. Then, she looked up at him. "You start," she whispered. He nodded, cleared his throat gently, and sang the first line, "Where the wind waits by the willow." His voice was steady, lower than it had been on stage, warmer. There was no crowd this time, no spotlight, just the sound of his voice filling the booth, like a memory remembered aloud. She joined in on the second line, her voice soft and pure. "'Tis where I go to see her face?" Their voices overlapped, not perfectly, but honestly, the timbre of age and youth dancing through Patricia's melody. It wasn't polished, it wasn't arranged, it was real. "When the stars blink in the window, and I feel too small to stand. I hear her whisper in the willow. She says, 'Come here and take my hand.'" Keanu looked over at his daughter between lines. Her eyes were closed. She was singing from somewhere deeper than the room allowed. Luna watched from the other side of the glass, hands clasped in front of her mouth. The engineer didn't move. The soundboard's levels lit gently, like candlelight. As they reached the chorus, their voices grew closer, not louder, just more certain. He says, "Let the night be soft around you. Let the questions loose their weight. You don't need to have the answers, just the will to wait." There was something timeless in it. A father passing down the comfort he had once been given. A daughter learning that some songs weren't meant for stadiums, they were meant for kitchens, for late nights, for holding someone's hand when there were no words left. They finished the song together, side by side, eyes wet but not broken. He says, "If you ever feel forgotten, don't forget the wind still knows where to find you in the silence, where to carry all your loads." When the last note faded, they didn't speak. The studio remained still for several seconds. Then, Keanu reached over and gently squeezed his daughter's hand. She smiled at him and whispered, "I think she heard that." He nodded once. "So do I." Outside, the sky over Vancouver had turned golden with dusk. The air carried that soft quiet before evening truly settles in. Birds glided overhead, and the light filtered through the trees like it was searching for something to hold. Inside Stardust Studio, Keanu Reeves placed the lyrics back into the folder marked Patricia Originals. He zipped it up slowly, like closing a chapter, with reverence instead of regret. The album would be finished in the weeks to come. But that session, just him and his daughter, singing a lullaby for a woman who still lived in every note, was the heartbeat of it all. No one watching would ever call it a performance. It was a memory, sung in real time, and now it would never be forgotten. It started with a single sentence on the new homepage of a website that looked more like a handwritten letter than a foundation. "Every child deserves a song." That was the motto of the newly launched Midnight Window Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to funding music programs for underprivileged children around the world. Keanu didn't announce it in a press conference. There were no red carpets, no ribbon-cutting ceremonies, just a quiet message posted to the same page that had once streamed the keynote performance. "This isn't about me. This is about the songs we all carry and the voices that haven't been heard yet. Within days, donations poured in, some large, but most small, $5, $10, $20, from people who had been moved by the song, the story, or their own memories of lullabies long forgotten. A retired music teacher in Wisconsin sent a check with a note. "I taught for 43 years. This is the most important thing I've seen in my lifetime." The proceeds from Keanu's album Songs from Midnight were donated entirely to the foundation. No profit was taken, no licensing deals signed. Even the streaming platform carried a footnote on every track. All revenue supports music education for those who need it most. But the ripple didn't stop at the donation page. Across schools in North America, teachers began adopting something they called Creative Fridays, an unstructured hour each week where students could sing, draw, write, or simply sit with their thoughts and express what was inside them. There were no grades, no wrong answers, just space. One teacher in Colorado wrote, "I played Midnight Window for my fifth graders and asked them what it made them feel. One girl said, 'Like someone remembered me.'" We've had Creative Fridays ever since. In a classroom in Seoul, a group of students began translating Patricia's lyrics into Korean, one verse at a time, writing their own melodies to match the tone. In Sao Paulo, students choreographed a dance around the phrase, "Follow the stars," using flashlight beams to represent the night sky. It became a kind of emotional curriculum, one that transcended borders. Maya, watching all of this unfold, realized something extraordinary was happening. Her small tech conference, originally a 2-day gathering for industry professionals, had transformed. Not in structure, but in spirit. What people now came for wasn't just innovation, it was reflection, connection. She decided to expand it. The next year, her team launched regional chapters of the event in Toronto, Berlin, Tokyo, and Johannesburg. Each location adapted the format to local culture, but every one of them ended the same way, with a new tradition called Voices of the Heart. It wasn't a closing keynote, it was an open mic. Attendees were invited to share something true, a story, a letter, a line from a song that had carried them through pain or joy. There was no judgment, no viral pressure, just voices, real ones. One by one, those sessions became the most talked about parts of each conference, not because of celebrity or surprise appearances, but because of what they unlocked. In Tokyo, a robotics engineer recited a poem he'd written after his father's passing, something he'd kept folded in his wallet for years. In Berlin, a product designer read a letter from her grandmother, who had fled war-torn Europe with nothing but a suitcase and a lullaby passed down through generations. In Johannesburg, a young coder played a recording of her mother singing to her over a grainy old voicemail. The room wept with her. Not because the voice was perfect, but because it was full. Keanu didn't attend every event, but when he did, he never arrived as the headliner. He arrived quietly, sat in the audience, listened, and when invited, he never spoke about acting, never about his career. He talked about courage, not the kind you see in movies, the kind it takes to be seen. In Toronto, he shared a story about the first time his mother sang to him after a hard day at school. "I didn't know what loneliness was back then, but I knew what it felt like when her voice reached it. That's how I learned what love sounds like." He told the crowd about finding Patricia's lyrics in the back of her drawer after she passed, about how he'd kept them hidden for years, not because they weren't good enough, but because they were too sacred to touch. "I used to think keeping them hidden meant I was protecting them," he said. "Now, I know I was hiding from them. And when I finally shared one, I realized I'd been hiding from myself." That talk was never officially recorded. Someone in the front row held up a phone, but stopped halfway through, as if they understood it wasn't a moment to be captured. It was a moment to be felt. Afterward, a small group of teenagers waited by the exit, not for autographs. They handed Keanu a printed flyer. It read, "Midnight Window Choir, Wednesdays at 6. All welcome. No auditions. He smiled, held the flyer to his chest, and said, "I'd come if I could." Word spread. Universities began launching small grants in partnership with the Midnight Window Initiative. Music therapy programs expanded. Trauma counselors began using songwriting as part of grief recovery. Henry Briscoe, Second Sight. In one school, a 10-year-old girl who hadn't spoken since the loss of her mother finally stood up during Creative Friday and sang a single line. "I see you in every star I follow," became the unofficial closing line for the movement. Printed on t-shirts, painted in murals, whispered into microphones at open mics and vigils. But no one claimed it. Not Keanu, not Maya, not Luna. No one tried to own it, because it didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to every child whose voice had never been heard, to every parent who had ever hummed through tears, to every person who had ever wondered if the ache inside them still mattered. And as the Midnight Window Initiative continued to grow, it never forgot its roots. One voice, one song, one room full of people brave enough to listen. The lights dimmed in the vast auditorium of Future Connect 2026, now held in San Francisco's renovated Civic Pavilion. The main hall, once known for its sleek presentations, dazzling visuals, and cutting-edge product debuts, had taken on a new spirit in the past year. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about resonance, memory, humanity. Maya stood on stage, the familiar weight of the microphone in her hands, the same one she had held a year ago when uncertainty clung to every breath. Now it felt different. It felt rooted. "Before we begin," she said softly, "I want to take a moment to remind us why we gather." The giant screen behind her lit up, not with brand logos or sleek transitions, but with a single sentence in a quiet serif font. "Where the wind waits by the willow." Murmurs passed gently through the audience. The line was familiar now, etched into notebooks, inked onto wrists, embroidered on jackets. For many, it had become more than a lyric. It was a lifeline. Maya stepped aside. The lights shifted to the left of the stage, where a group of children stood in a simple arc. They wore white shirts with navy sashes. Each sash carried a stitched star. These weren't professional singers, they were students. Ages 7 to 15, from programs funded by the Midnight Window Initiative. The auditorium held its breath. A single guitar strum opened the song. Then a small voice, barely louder than a whisper, began the first line. "Through the midnight window, I can see the moon lean low." Other voices joined one by one, shy, imperfect, honest. "I wonder if she's watching me from somewhere I can't go." The harmony wasn't polished, but it was full of truth. In the front row, Rico gripped the arms of his chair. His eyes glistened behind his glasses. His phone stayed in his pocket. He didn't want to record this. He wanted to feel it. 2 rows back, Kai Nakamura sat completely still. A year ago, he had walked into this conference looking for a moment to mock. Now his shirt had the words, "Let the night be soft around you," printed across the front in hand-lettered script. His camera team had asked if he'd be filming today. He told them no. "This isn't content," he said. "It's sacred." As the children reached the second verse, a quiet shift occurred backstage. A figure stepped into the wings, dressed in a simple black shirt, jeans, and worn boots. Keanu. He walked slowly toward the edge of the curtain, the lyrics already forming silently on his lips. The crew hadn't announced him. No one had told the audience he would be here. The children knew, but had been asked to keep it a secret. And they had, because some things are better when revealed in stillness. As the final chorus approached, the lead girl gave a subtle nod toward stage left. The band paused for just a beat longer than expected. Then Keanu stepped into the light. The moment Keanu appeared, a collective inhale swept through the auditorium. He didn't wave, He didn't speak. He simply walked to the center of the ark of children and stood among them like he had always belonged there. No spotlight followed him. The lights remained even, shared, one voice among many. He looked down briefly, then at the girl beside him. She smiled, barely able to contain her emotion, but held firm. She gave him a nod. Keanu began to sing, "I see you in every star I follow." His voice was older now, a little raspier than it had been the year before, but it still held that same trembling truth. And when the children joined in, their voices layered with his, like threads in a warm blanket. The entire room swayed with the weight of something unspeakable. I walk a road without a map, but still I move ahead. Rico wept openly now. He didn't wipe his tears. He let them fall. Kai had his hand over his mouth. Next to him, a stranger reached out gently and rested a hand on his shoulder. Kai didn't even look to see who it was. He just nodded and leaned into it. On stage, Keanu's voice slowed with the tempo. "Because I know she walks with me, though all the stars have fled." And then came the final verse, the one everyone had memorized by heart, whether they'd meant to or not. Cheem says, "If you ever feel forgotten, don't forget the wind still knows where to find you in the silence, where to carry all your lows." Keanu closed his eyes as he sang the final line, and he let the last note linger, not long, just enough. Then, silence, the kind that says more than noise ever could. He looked up slowly. The children beside him did too. Their shoulders touched. Their hands at their sides were still but strong. And then the audience rose. No one told them to. They didn't rise in waves. They rose all at once, like something had lifted them. Applause didn't erupt. It grew. It blossomed into something that sounded more like gratitude than celebration. People clapped. Some cried quietly. Some shouted "thank you" through their sobs. Others stood still, hands over hearts, as if anything more would break them wide open. Keanu stepped back and bowed, not from the waist, but just his head. A simple gesture of acknowledgement, of humility. Then he turned and embraced the lead girl, whispering something no one else heard. She nodded, eyes shining. The children filed off stage. Keanu followed behind them. Maya returned to the microphone. She looked out over the crowd, her voice quiet and steady. "Last year, we ended this conference with a question. What happens when we allow ourselves to be seen?" She paused. The room waited. "This year, I think we know the answer." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The screen behind her lit up once more and the final slide appeared. No text this time. Just an image of the original sheet of lyrics. Patricia's handwriting. Her loops and ink smudges, exactly as they had been on that old page Keanu found tucked in a drawer. The last line of the song circled in red ink. "I see you in every star I follow." The lights dimmed. The audience stood quietly, many still holding each other, some placing hands over their hearts once more. And then, slowly, they began to leave. Not in a rush, but in reverence, as if stepping out of a place that had reminded them, just for a moment, who they really were. 2 weeks after Future Connect 2026 ended, Maya returned to her office in Los Angeles. Her desk, usually buried in schedules and speaker requests, was clean. She'd cleared it herself the night before she flew to San Francisco, unsure of what would follow. Now something waited there. A single envelope in soft cream paper, unmarked except for her name in neat handwriting. She knew the writing. She sat down slowly and opened it, her hands careful, deliberate. Inside was a folded letter, written in dark blue ink. The strokes were heavy in some places, lighter in others. The way handwriting looks when it carries something weightier than words. "Maya, I never imagined singing that song would change so many lives. I didn't do it for attention. I did it for her, for Patricia. But you gave it a home. You gave her voice a place to land. And because of that, I want you to have this. There was no signature. Just a second folded page behind the letter. Thinner paper, yellowed slightly around the edges. As Maya unfolded it, her breath caught. It wasn't more writing from Keanu. It was a journal page, handwritten in another voice. The ink had faded in places, but the handwriting was unmistakably feminine. Elegant and a little unsteady, like someone writing late at night by lamplight. There was no title, just a paragraph and a short line below it. I sing to him when he's tired, when the world has worn him out, when he's too young to name what hurts, but old enough to carry it. I write these songs because I know one day I won't be able to sing them for him, but maybe, just maybe, my boy will share these songs someday. Below that, in smaller handwriting, the words, "If he does, I hope the world listens kindly." Maya stared at the page, her throat tight. It felt like reading someone's prayer, a message left in time, meant to be found only when its meaning could take root. She rose from her desk and walked to the framed print on the back wall. A minimalist piece showing a single star in a night sky. She gently lifted it off the hook and set it aside. In its place, she mounted the journal page. No plaque, no caption, just the paper, the words, and the space around it. People who came into her office in the weeks that followed always paused when they saw it. Some asked what it was. Most didn't. They just stood there, silent, the way people stand in front of something holy. Maya never explained it. She didn't need to. In the following months, that journal page became something more than a framed artifact. It became a quiet legend. Photographs of it began to surface, never posted by Maya, never broadcast by media. Instead, visitors would capture it gently, the way people take a picture of something not for fame but for memory. Artists painted versions of it in watercolor. Poets used the line, "Maybe my boy will share these songs someday," as a prompt in workshops. Songwriters wrote verses that grew from those words like roots finding water. And always, always, people asked one question: who was Patricia? Not the celebrity's mother, not the songwriter behind the curtain, but the woman who saw her son clearly enough to know that one day he'd need her words more than she could explain. She had written those songs not to be heard by the world. She wrote them because she loved her son, and because she believed, quietly, stubbornly, that maybe her voice could still hold him after she was gone. And it had. Keanu never spoke about the journal page publicly. Not in interviews, not in speeches. When asked about Patricia, he always smiled softly and said, "She gave me more than I ever understood at the time." But then came the interview. It wasn't with a major news outlet or a glossy magazine. It was with a podcast hosted by a high school senior named Lizette, whose small show focused on creativity and grief. She had written to Keanu's team with no expectation, just honesty. "My mom died last year," she wrote. "She used to write me songs too. I only have 2, but they keep me going. If you ever wanted to talk about what that feels like, I'd love to listen." 3 weeks later, she got the reply. He said yes. They recorded in her school library. No video, just audio. The conversation was quiet, tender, almost whispered. And near the end, Lizette asked, "What do you think your mom would say if she saw everything now? The foundation, the songs, all of it?" Keanu paused for a long time. Then he said, "I think she'd tell me I took too long." They both laughed softly. Then he added, "But I also think she'd be proud. Not of the stage, not of the spotlight. Just proud that I finally let her voice keep doing what it was always meant to do." Lizette asked one final question. "What would you say to someone who's scared to share what they carry?" Keanu answered, without hesitation, "I'd say we all carry a song. The brave ones sing it aloud." That quote traveled fast. not because it was slick or well-crafted, but because people knew it was true. It was printed on tote bags, added to murals, screened onto shirts sold to fund school art programs. But most importantly, it showed up in places where courage had long been silenced. On sticky notes in therapists' offices, on chalkboards in middle schools, on the first page of blank journals given to kids entering foster care. It was even read aloud in a small church in Kentucky, where a teenage boy stood up during open mic night and said, "I've never sung in front of anyone before, but my mom used to tell me I had a song, and I think tonight I want to find out if she was right." He sang all 3 verses of Midnight Window, off-key but steady. The room gave him a standing ovation. And that night when he got home, he wrote in his journal, "I was brave today." In Maya's office, the framed page remained. Visitors still came. They didn't always know what they were looking for, but they always found stillness. Keanu sent her a message once, short and handwritten. It said, "Thank you for making room for her voice in the world." She kept that one taped to the inside of her desk drawer, not to show, but to remember. Because she knew that some voices don't need to be loud to echo forever. The ripple became a wave. In classrooms, nursing homes, hospitals, and community centers, the melody of Midnight Window found its way into daily life, not as a performance, but as a practice. Music had always been a tool for connection, but now it was becoming a quiet revolution. At a school in Minneapolis, 4th grade teacher Angela Morris began starting her mornings by dimming the lights and playing an instrumental version of the song. Students would sit silently, some drawing, others writing. One boy began writing letters to his late grandfather. Another, who rarely spoke in class, began humming along with his head down. By the end of the semester, he stood up and read a poem he wrote, titled "The Stars Know My Name." In a care facility in Nova Scotia, nurses developed a memory circle tradition. Every Friday evening, residents gathered in a sunroom with old radios and handmade lyric books. They would sing songs from their childhoods, then close with Midnight Window, the full version. It became the one song everyone knew by heart, even those suffering from memory loss. One nurse said, "It's like the song taps into something deeper than memory. It touches the place where love never fades." Hospitals took notice too. At a trauma recovery unit in Chicago, therapists created a playlist called Courage at Midnight. It featured calming songs for patients undergoing long recovery sessions. The playlist began with Midnight Window and ended with a recording of a child whispering, "You're not alone." Soon, families began adopting the tradition, not formally, organically. In living rooms and kitchens, parents and children began gathering once a week, not for homework or television, but to sing. Some called it lullaby night, others simply called it Fridays. But across the world, the act of singing together, not well, not rehearsed, just together, became a healing ritual. Videos surfaced online. A father in the Philippines singing with his daughter while she played the ukulele. A grandmother in Scotland harmonizing with her grandsons. A mother and son in Ohio singing off-key but laughing the whole way through. The hashtag Midnight Courage began to spread. It wasn't meant to be a movement, but it became one. People used it to share their stories, the stories they'd never told before. One woman in Texas posted, "This song helped me leave an abusive marriage. I sang it in my car every night for weeks. I told myself the wind still knows where to find me." A teenager in India shared a short video. He wore headphones and sang softly into the night air from a rooftop. The caption read, "For my mom. She never heard me sing, but maybe she still can." In the center of all of it, Kai Nakamura's YouTube channel transformed. Once filled with satire and sarcasm, his uploads became reflections. Interviews with teachers, survivors, artists, and ordinary people who had done extraordinary things by simply choosing to be vulnerable. His new channel title read, "The Courage Feat," and its tagline, written in lowercase letters, "Because every voice matters, even the shaking ones." Kai's most watched video to date was titled, "The Night My Father Cried." In it, he sat in a dim room. No lighting setup, no intro music, just him speaking into the camera. "My dad's a war veteran. He doesn't cry." Or he didn't. "We watched the Midnight Window performance together. He didn't say anything after, just got up and left the room. I thought maybe I'd pushed something too far." He looked down, taking a breath. An hour later, I walked past his room and heard him singing. Quiet, just one line, over and over. "I see you in every star I follow." He had a photo of my mom on his lap. That night, we talked for 4 hours. About love, about loss, about all the things men were never taught to say. Kai's channel became a gathering place, not just for grief, but for healing, for bravery, for beginnings. Meanwhile, Rico found himself writing again. His article, "The Day Keanu Reminded Us We're Human," had started it. But as the movement expanded, as the ripples spread further and deeper, Rico realized he wasn't just witnessing a moment, he was witnessing a shift. He began interviewing families, teachers, musicians, people who had found themselves in the words of a song written by a mother decades ago. His book, The Human Algorithm: What Tech Forgot About the Soul, became a New York Times bestseller within 2 weeks of release. In it, he wrote, "We taught machines to speak, but in the process, we forgot how to listen to each other." This movement reminded us, vulnerability is not the bug in the system, it's the code we've been missing. The final chapter was titled, "Stars We Still Follow." It was dedicated to Patricia. And just like that, her name, once known only to her son, became known to the world. Music departments across colleges began naming scholarships after her. Public schools created Patricia Days, where students were encouraged to bring in a song, poem, or piece of art from someone in their family, something personal, something real. One elementary school in Oregon painted a mural in their music room with the phrase, "Maybe my boy will share these songs someday." Underneath, every child who sang in the school choir signed their name. In neighborhoods across the country, small groups met weekly for what they called open window nights. People sat in circles, parks, porches, backyards, and shared something from the heart. No judgment, no formality. A boy in Montana brought a harmonica. A grandmother in Atlanta read a letter she wrote to her daughter in heaven. A woman in Tokyo shared the melody her mother used to hum while folding laundry. What began as a song had become a language, and what had begun as Keanu's private moment of grief had transformed into millions of people finding the courage to open their own windows, to be seen, and to remember, to sing. Keanu remained quiet through it all. He continued to work behind the scenes with the Midnight Window Initiative, attending school performances, visiting small community centers, writing letters to teachers and parents. Never as a celebrity, just as someone who understood what it meant to carry something tender and true. Once, during a small gathering in Vancouver, a young girl stood up and asked him, "Do you still sing the song?" He smiled, then nodded. "Every week," he said, "sometimes out loud, sometimes just in my heart. But I never stopped singing it." The girl said, "I think your mom hears it every time." And he replied, "I think she hears all of us now." The garden was quiet, nestled behind Keanu's modest home just outside Vancouver. The sun was low, casting warm, golden light across the tops of the trees. A gentle breeze moved through the lavender bushes. The birds had quieted. The world, for a moment, seemed still. Keanu sat at a wooden table near the edge of the stone path. A journal lay open in front of him, pages gently fluttering in the wind. His pen moved slowly, carefully, as if each word had to be coaxed from something deeper than memory. He paused to read what he had just written. I never thought I'd sing in public, but I did, and it changed me." He sat with that line for a long time, not because he wasn't sure if it was true, but because it was more true than he'd expected. A soft breeze passed again, and the faint notes of a piano melody drifted from inside the house. Luna had recorded an instrumental version of Midnight Window. No vocals, just the quiet rise and fall of keys that felt like breathing. He listened to it now as he sat alone, but not lonely. There were echoes in the silence around him, of Patricia's voice, of children singing, of strangers in cities across the world sharing what they were once too afraid to say aloud. He turned the page and continued writing. "A year ago, I thought vulnerability was something to be hidden, that silence meant safety. But it turns out, silence can be a cage, too." He smiled faintly and underlined the last sentence. Behind him, wind chimes rang gently. He wrote one more line. "Sometimes, what begins as a joke becomes the truth you needed to say all along." He closed the journal, not with finality, but with peace. He looked around the garden, eyes landing on the small wind spinner his daughter had made in art class, painted blue and silver, with a single gold star in the center. It spun slowly in the breeze, casting tiny reflections across the stone patio like scattered stardust. He reached for the tea mug beside him. It had a chipped handle and a phrase printed in fading ink, "Let the night be soft around you." He didn't remember who gave it to him, maybe a student, maybe Luna, maybe Maya. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it had become part of his rhythm, like the journal, like the song, like the stillness his mother taught him to seek. As Keanu sat in the fading light, he reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't Patricia's lyrics this time. It was a letter, one he had written to himself. He opened it slowly, the creases worn from countless rereads. The ink was smudged in places, but still legible. "To the part of me I used to hide. Thank you for waiting." That was all it said. He had written it months ago, just after recording Where the Wind Waits with his daughter. He hadn't shown it to anyone. He hadn't needed to. It was a marker, a quiet flag, planted at the edge of something he used to fear and now carried with care. The garden light flickered on above the back door. Night had come, but it didn't feel dark. He closed his eyes and listened. No traffic, no distant voices, just the wind and the soft piano from inside, still playing Patricia's melody, as if her hands were guiding it. His thoughts moved slowly, like waves lapping against the edge of something sacred. He thought of Maya, who had built a stage big enough for silence, of Rico, whose pen had finally written what so many had buried, of Kai, whose skepticism had turned into stewardship, of the children, thousands of them, singing songs they hadn't even known lived in them, and of the millions who would never go viral, never stand on a stage, but had found the courage to sing in the small, unrecorded corners of their lives. He thought of his mother, of how she used to hum while folding laundry, of how she would smile without words when he walked in, exhausted from the world, and of how, somehow, her lullabies had become lanterns for others long after she had gone. He leaned back in his chair, let the wind touch his face, and whispered the final line of the song into the sky. "I see you in every star I follow." Then he reached for the journal again, not to write, just to hold, as if holding it meant holding her, as if it reminded him that he wasn't just carrying a melody, he was carrying a legacy. And that legacy had done what no product, performance, or platform ever could. It had made people feel less alone. He stood up slowly, stretched, and walked toward the door. Before stepping inside, he turned once more to look at the sky. The stars had started to appear. Faint, scattered, but real. One by one they returned, just like voices, just like songs. Now it's your turn. What about you? What is the hidden part of you that's been waiting? The memory you've been afraid to revisit? The song you've never dared to sing? The words you've only whispered inside? Maybe it's time, because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs your truth. You tremble, your honesty. And if Keanu Reeves can carry a mother's lullaby from his childhood into a room of strangers, and in doing so start a movement of courage and connection, then maybe you can share your story too. So we ask you, what's a hidden part of you that deserves to be heard? Is it a song? A memory? A dream? We invite you to share it in the comments. Let this space be your midnight window. And one more thing. What story should Keanu help tell next? We've walked through grief, forgiveness, family, and second chances together. But your voice helps shape the path forward? So tell us, what truth are you holding that the world needs to hear? We're listening, and maybe, just maybe, Patricia is too.